We're learning Sefer Yirmiyahu, Perek Yudchet, chapter 18. This Perek focuses on the prophecy of the Beit HaYotzer, of the potter's house, kexomar biyad hayotzer, like clay in the hands of the potter. You might be familiar with this prophecy because it became the basis for the famous piyut, which really is the highlight of Yom Kippur evening for Ashkenazim, ki hinei kexomar biyad hayotzer, that we are like clay in the hands of the potter. Chapter 18. Hadavar asher haya el Yirmiyahu me'et Hashem lemor. This is the word to Yirmiyahu from God. Kum v'yirata beit hayotzer. So Hashem tells Yirmiyahu to go down to the potter's home. Obviously, the Yotzer, the pottery house, was probably in the lower part of the city, because it had to be near the water, so that they could constantly get water to mold the clay. V'sama ashmiyacha et devarai, and there I will give you my word. They read Beit HaYotzer, he went down to the potter's house. V'yinehu oseh malacha al ovnaim. The potter was doing his work on the potter's wheel. So v'nishchata kli ashehu oseh b'chomer biyad hayotzer, and he would break the kli, he would break the vessel that was still molding, that was still moist, where he was making with the pottery in the hands of the Yotzer, in the hands of the potter. V'shav yaseu kli acher. Then he'd go back, he'd make another vessel. Kasher yashar beinai hayotzer lasot. Whatever was good in the eyes of the Yotzer, of the potter, to do, that's what he would do. So he sees a visual demonstration. You can imagine this. Maybe you can see this yourselves if you go down to a potter's home, of a potter working, and he has this pottery wheel that makes the clay move. It's constantly turning, and he takes his hands and he does what's called coning, and he can bring up the clay that's still moist, and then if he doesn't like it, he could push it down again, and then he could bring it up, and then he could push it down, and while it's moist and it's on the potter's wheel, he can keep forming the clay and destroying the clay, forming the vessel, destroying the piece of pottery, forming the pottery, destroying the pottery. That was the image that Hashem showed Yirmiyahu. And what's the meaning of this image? Vayihi devar Hashem elai lemor, and God said to him, Haki yotzer hazeh lo ucha latzot lachem beit Yisrael? Can't I do like this Yotzer, like this pottery, to the house of Israel? Num Hashem, God says, Hinei kechomer biyad Yotzer, kematem biyadi beit Yisrael. Like clay in the hands of the potter, so are you in my hand, the house of Israel. So God says, this is the mashal, this is the metaphor for the way that God can be to Bnei Yisrael, just like the potter forming the clay in his hands, so too Bnei Israel are kabiyachol in God's hands, and he can form them, and we'll explain right now what that means. A moment I could speak on a nation, on a kingdom, to destroy it, to knock it down, to uproot it. Okay, so God can give a prophecy, l'ra, prophecy for evil, against Bnei Israel. V'shava goyahu mirato. But what happens if the nation does tshuva? Asher dibarti alav, that I had spoken bad against. V'nichamti alarad. Kaviyachol, God can change his mind against the evil. Asher chashavti lasot lo, that I thought to do to them. So God says, I can, even when there's an evil prophecy, there's a prophecy for destruction, like in Sefer Yirmiyahu there is often. Still, if there's tshuva, if the nation returns, God can change his mind kaviyachol. Just like kexomar biyad hayotzer, if he doesn't like the pot that's being made, he can just reform it to a different pot. God can change the prediction and reform it to a better prediction from an evil one. But it works both ways. I could give a prediction about a nation and about a kingdom, that they're going to be built, that they're going to be planted. And then they do evil. Chapter pasuk yud. Levoti shemoa bekoli. They don't listen to my words. V'nichamti al tova asher amarti leitiv to. And God kabiyachol can change his mind again about the good as well. God can make a good prophecy, and it seems to be, we'll discuss this in a moment, they can change the good prophecy as well if they do bad, and it cannot come true. V'ata, and now, and more now, Ish Yehudav al Yoshvei Yerushalayim lemor, speak to the people of Judah and the inhabitants of Yerushalayim. Ko amar Hashem, thus says Hashem, Hinei anochi yotzer alechem ra. I am forming evil upon you. V'choshev alechem machshava. I'm thinking a thought, a plan. Shuvu na ish midarcho hara v'etiu darchechem alechem. Everyone should do tshuva and change their ways. In other words, even though I have this forming of a plan against you for destruction, it can still change. You can still get better, and it can still become a good prophecy. Now, the fundamental question here of this from Yirmiyahu, kexomar b'yad Yotzer, we understand that prophecy for bad can be turned to good. The classic example is the Sefer Yonah, which we read on Yom Kippur as well, with the people of Nineveh. They said in 40 days the city will be destroyed, and instead they did tshuva. The city was overturned in a good way, and it wasn't destroyed. But here he says even a prophecy for good seemingly can be overturned to become a prophecy for bad if they don't act well. So there are a couple of understandings of this. Some of Farshim, like Radak, emphasize the fact that really it doesn't mean that the prophecy for good won't come true. It just means that the prophecy for good won't come true right now. In other words, I say there's going to be a great event that's going to happen. You think it's going to happen next year. There'll be a third temple. But really, the third temple could be transformed if, God forbid, we do a Veirot. It could happen 100 years from now. It could happen way later, 1,000 years. As we saw the prophecies of Chagai Zechariah Malachi about the second temple, a lot of them are only going to come true with the third temple. So that's one understanding, the Radak's understanding. But the Malbim actually, in a number of places, has a different understanding, that really even a nevuah for good can be transformed. Because in reality, prophets don't predict the future. Like the Yotzer here, prophets shape the future. Prophets tell you not what will happen, but what could happen if you do right. But really, it's all up to us. God is the one who forms the prophecy, but really this is the prophecy of the tremendous power of free will, that based on our choices and our decisions, we can transform Kabiyachol, God's predictions, even for evil, for good. Or it could be the flip side. His predictions for good could be transformed to evil. It's really all up to us.